The Long Live Alternative Parties podcast. Today, friends, we have another exciting guest on this podcast, like we tend to. His name is Thomas Laehn, and he's with the Libertarian Party in Iowa. He's going to tell us about the office he's running for. So welcome to the podcast, Thomas.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
We are glad to have you. So if we could get started by you kindly giving us an introduction to yourself, a brief biographical sketch.
Sure. So I live in Jefferson, Iowa, with my wife and our two children. Our daughter's 6, and we just had a baby boy who's now 4 months old. I am the elected county attorney in Greene County, Iowa. Many places call it a district attorney, but in Iowa we have county attorneys. I was first elected in 2018, becoming the first Libertarian to hold an elective partisan office in the state of Iowa. I'm still the only Libertarian to hold an elective partisan office in the state, so my election wasn't the cutting edge of the overthrow of the two-party system that I hoped it would be. But I was then reelected again as a Libertarian in 2022, so I'm in my second term in office. I grew up in a small town in Iowa. I did my undergraduate in Iowa, left the state for 10 years. I earned a master's and PhD in political science at Louisiana State University, went to Hebrew University in Jerusalem, where I was a research fellow for a year, came back to the States, taught political science, specifically American government and constitutional law, as well as political philosophy at McNeese State University in Lake Charles, Louisiana. But I wanted to get back to Iowa. I knew someday I wanted to start a family, raise my kids in a small town like the one I grew up in. So I went to law school at the University of Iowa, got my law degree, and then immediately moved to Greene County and ran for district attorney. And that is how I ended up in Jefferson, Iowa.
Wow, that's impressive. You got two post-bachelor's degrees. That's impressive. Wow.
Yeah, and I had that initial career teaching in the university, and it was very rewarding. But I earned my PhD and was teaching at the age of about 26, and I didn't want to spend the rest of my life kind of teaching the same classes over and over again every semester. I wanted to try something new and kind of be reincarnated, and I wanted to get back to rural Iowa, and a law degree seemed like the best way to do that. Nationwide, there are more people graduating law school than there are jobs available for lawyers, so it's not an auspicious time to go to law school. But that national surplus of attorneys hides a lot of variation at the local level. And in rural America, especially rural Iowa, there's a real shortage of attorneys. So I knew if I went to law school, there would be a job waiting for me somewhere in rural Iowa.
Oh, great. So how would you say that so being a law student versus being a PhD student, how would you say they're different?
Yeah, so they are actually very different experiences. I have never met anyone who enjoyed law school.
Oh, my.
Yeah, no, it's not a fun process. It's highly competitive. At most law schools in the world, your grade in a class hinges entirely on your final exam. So you don't do any graded work all semester, and then your grade in the class depends on how you perform on that final test. Your class rank. They kind of foster this competitive environment where in a class of, say, 120 students, if you're first or fifth or 97th. And you're learning a skill and a way of thinking that's very useful. But it's very different from graduate school in the social sciences or the liberal arts. That experience was very enjoyable. I sat around reading books about really interesting topics and discussing those books with people who were equally interested in those topics. And I really felt like I came out of graduate school kind of a different person than I went in. I had kind of
Oh,
grown kind of intellectually, even kind of spiritually.
oh my.
I was a different person at the end of the process. Uh, a PhD in political science, though, isn't as useful as a law degree.
Oh, sure.
Especially, I specialized in ancient political thought, ancient Greek and Roman political thought, which really
Oh my.
informs kind of my interpretation of American politics
Oh,
today.
wow.
But, so law school I left with a set of skills that were very useful at the end of a process I didn't enjoy. Graduate school, I left the process kind of a different person, I think a better person than I went in. It was a very enjoyable process. But a PhD in political science doesn't have the same marketability as a law degree.
Oh, sure. That makes sense. So in your position as the county attorney, as you say they call them in Iowa, how have you implemented your libertarian vision?
That's a great question. On a day-to-day basis, I have two overarching responsibilities. First, I'm responsible for the prosecution of all crime that occurs within the four corners of my county. And then secondly, I'm the county's attorney. So anytime other county level officials need legal advice, need contracts, need deeds for the sale of property or the purchase of property, I draft all of those instruments. And so much of what I do doesn't really, or I should say that my identity as a libertarian, my kind of libertarian beliefs, doesn't really affect what I do. A contract is either well written or poorly written, and it doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat or a libertarian or anything else. But there are philosophical positions I hold that do influence some of my decisions. I'm a huge proponent of individual liberty, civil liberties, civil rights. So, every search warrant that is executed in Greene County, I have to approve.
Wow.
And I'm not going to approve a search warrant that I believe infringes somebody's civil liberties or civil rights. And I think, most prosecutors would make a similar statement, but I think I'm maybe a little more sensitive to those issues or a little more concerned about ensuring that we are respecting people's rights than someone else might be in my position. And some of the advice I've given to the county. So I drafted a public records policy and a public meetings policy for the county to ensure that we have transparency in government, which I think, I took the initiative on that, in part because of my political and philosophical beliefs, that I believe government needs to be transparent. I think that's kind of a libertarian position. And it's not that I was asked to draft those policies, but that I drafted them and presented them to the other elected officials in the county who adopted them. So I do think that there are situations, there have been times where my libertarian beliefs have influenced my decisions and my actions as county attorney. But also, though, just on a day-to-day basis, if I'm drafting a contract for the county, the fact that I'm a libertarian doesn't really have any bearing on that.
Okay. Okay. So there's a few things that libertarian directly influences your approach. Yeah, there's other things that would be neutral, that wouldn't depend on one's political ideology.
Yes, and then I would say honestly, 80% of what I do, I'm either doing it competently or I'm not, and my philosophical beliefs don't have any effect on that. But there are some things, positions I've taken. Most notably, the one thing I've done as county attorney that probably got me the most notoriety was when, under the Biden administration, they had the vaccination mandate
Okay.
for COVID, and purportedly this unilateral action coming out of the executive branch in D.C. Required every employer with more than 100 employees to require their employees to be vaccinated. And if the employers didn't do this, they were facing huge fines, more than $100,000 per week as I calculated it. The employer, if the employer wanted, could allow their employees to instead provide weekly notes from their doctors showing that they had tested negative for COVID, and those notes would then go into the employee's file. And I believed from day one this was unconstitutional. That the president did not have authority to force you to inject something into your body, and if you refused, that they would take away your livelihood. That was wholly unconstitutional and unprecedented, because these employers are being told either your employees get vaccinated or you have to terminate them, and that sort of despotic action was just unprecedented in American history. And I told my the Board of Supervisors is kind of like our legislative body in Greene County. I told the supervisors, we are not implementing this in Greene County. We are not going to facilitate unconstitutional executive actions. Because every elected official in the United States swears an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution. And I'm not going to be a party to the violation of the Constitution. I'm not going to force employers in Greene County to execute unconstitutional, tyrannical directives from the executive branch. And ultimately, the U.S. Supreme Court agreed and struck down the mandate as unconstitutional. But it put me in a very difficult position because on the one hand, I was being asked to violate the Constitution, my own understanding of the Constitution, which I would not do. I would not violate my oath of office. But on the other hand, if we didn't do it, Greene County was facing more than $100,000 in administrative fines per week. And we're a rural county. I mean, that would have bankrupted the county eventually if we didn't implement it. So I had told the Board of Supervisors that, if this ultimately comes down as something we have to do, I can't expose our taxpayers to $100,000 worth of fines per week and bankrupt our county government. So I was prepared to resign because I also wasn't going to violate my oath of office.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah, that's it. That's a moral dilemma for you, it sounds like.
Yeah, it was. And the only way out was to resign. And a lot of people misunderstood my position. I had a lot of people claiming I was anti-vaccine, and I was just kind of neutral on that. I'm not pro-vaccine, anti-vaccine, at least I didn't take any positions publicly. I didn't care if our employees got vaccinated. That was between them and their doctors. I was never against the vaccine. I was against the federal government, and especially the president acting unilaterally, telling us that we had to be vaccinated or lose our jobs. Okay. That's what I was opposed to the mandate, not the vaccine itself.
Sure. Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. It's like anything with the libertarians deal with, that if you make it illegal, it doesn't necessarily mean you endorse it. Like you probably want to decriminalize drugs, but I don't see you as a person that would take crack every day, right?
Correct. I have never done an illegal drug in my life, but I am all for the decriminalization of marijuana. Great.
So how do you handle drug cases in your county, or haven't you had too many come up?
No, we do, and that's also a great question. It puts me in kind of a paradoxical position. So I have a duty to enforce the law. And as long as the law is constitutional, it's a valid law that I am obligated to enforce. And I think, state drug laws are constitutional. Now, they may be unwise, but they are the law in Iowa, and therefore I enforce law. So I prosecute people for possessing marijuana, even though I believe marijuana should be legal. But I'm not a legislator, not yet at least. I don't make the law as a prosecutor. I have a duty to execute and enforce the law. The speeding limit on the highway out of town here in Jefferson is 55 miles per hour. I think it could probably be 60 miles per hour with no loss of public safety. But I'm still going to prosecute the person who speeds, even though I think maybe the law doesn't have it quite right. And the same is true with marijuana. Recreational marijuana is still illegal in the state of Iowa. And if someone's caught with recreational marijuana, I will prosecute them, because I swore an oath to uphold the law.
Okay. So do you give them the least punishment possible, or do you still believe that going with the Constitution is having to get not the least punishment possible?
That's a good question. So, ultimately the punishment is up to the judge. At sentencing, the judge picks the punishment. Now, I will say, if someone's caught with a personal amount of marijuana, I'm going to expect that person to plead guilty. That's a crime, and I'll prosecute, and we'll probably reach some sort of plea deal. Now, am I recommending that person go to jail? Absolutely not. I can make a recommendation at sentencing time for the judge, and I'm not going to, unless there's some, really exacerbating circumstance. I mean, if they're caught with marijuana while they're standing over a dead body, that might change things. But if it's just, a small amount of marijuana, they're not going to jail. And we have overcrowded prisons in Iowa. The numbers I have are, I think, a little out of date, but at one time our prisons were at like 129% capacity. And I think that's partly because we've criminalized behavior that is victimless. I mean, I don't understand why we have people in prison for possessing marijuana when we don't even have enough beds for the murderers and the rapists. So I think that's yet another, there's several reasons we need to decriminalize marijuana. One is that we have people in prison for victimless crimes, and our prisons are overcrowded, and it would help reduce our inmate, overcrowding. Two, it's just a tremendous waste of taxpayer dollars. I mean, but by the time we arrest someone for possessing marijuana, my office prosecutes them. They probably have a court-appointed attorney, so the taxpayer is not only paying for the prosecution, the taxpayer is paying for the defense, paying for the judge's time, the court costs. We've probably spent, $1,200 prosecuting someone for possessing marijuana. At the end of the day, they're probably going to pay a $430 fine. So we've spent, more than $1,000. We're only going to recoup less than half of that in the form of a fine. And all we've really done then is created a surcharge for people who want to use marijuana. If you want to use marijuana, you just have to, but we're going to spend, $2 in taxpayer dollars for every dollar you pay for the right to smoke marijuana. It's just a tremendous waste of taxpayer money. And then there's just a liberty interest involved too. If someone wants to smoke marijuana, I don't smoke marijuana. It's probably not good for your health. I wouldn't advise anyone to do it, but it's your body, and if you want to do it, I might advise you against it, but ultimately you should be free to smoke marijuana if you want to.
Sure, makes sense. So how do you feel about jury nullification?
I'm a proponent. I'm probably the only prosecutor in America who believes in jury nullification.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, and as your listeners probably know, I mean, jury nullification is this idea that a jury is not merely the finders of the facts; they're also the finders of the law. That judges now will tell you, oh, there's this division of labor. The judge will tell the jury what the law is. The jury has to kind of mindlessly adopt whatever the judge says. And then it's the jury's job to apply the law to the facts and find out what happened factually. Okay. And I reject that division of labor. The jury is, in my view, an instantiation of the sovereign. They are the people. Just like when the people vote on election day, the people are a higher authority than any elected official. This is American Government 101. Declaration of Independence. That the people form the government, and our rights pre-exist the formation of government. We create governments to protect our pre-existing rights, and the government government officials are the agents of the people. We don't owe our rights to the government. The government owes its existence to us. And all elected officials or appointed officials, judges, they're ultimately agents and servants of the people, and the jury represents the people themselves. And if the jury thinks that a law is unconstitutional, then the jury can say, we find the defendant not guilty, not because he didn't commit the acts he's been accused of committing. We believe he committed those acts, but we believe the law itself, the criminal statute under which he's being prosecuted, is unconstitutional, and we will not enforce an unconstitutional law. And therefore we find him not guilty because the crime with which he's been accused isn't a crime. This has a rich history in the United States. The jurors refused to enforce the fugitive slave laws before the Civil War because they believed they were unconstitutional. And the Alien and Sedition Acts during the John Adams administration, where the federal government said that it's illegal to criticize the government. And jurors refused to find people guilty of criticizing the government. Again, not because they didn't criticize the government, but because that criminal statute was a violation of the First Amendment and therefore was void. I believe in jury nullification, and I refuse to include, so we get to give proposed jury instructions at criminal trials, and there's an anti-nullification instruction that can be included, and I refuse to include it. The jurors have the right to find someone I'm prosecuting not guilty if they believe the crime they've been charged with the statute under which they've been charged is unconstitutional. So I actually, even though I'm the one prosecuting the case, I think the jurors have the right to acquit if they believe the criminal statute is unconstitutional.
Okay. That's a great perspective. Now, I do have a question. There's a dark side of jury nullification. Sometimes in the past, especially in the Jim Crow South, the jurors said people who were guilty of lynching, they said they were not guilty. They were all white jurors, and they said they were not guilty, even though they were guilty. Like the people who killed Emmett Till, after it happened, they said, we did it, because they were off the hook. They knew they weren't going to get double jeopardy. So how do we prevent jury nullification from that dark aspect of it?
Yeah, that's a good question. Just as there are many instances in both American and British history where jury nullification was used for good to prevent tyranny, there are examples of jury nullification used by jurors to protect guilty people for racist or other reasons. That is a problem in any free society. The same is true on election day. Voters could vote to elect an Adolf Hitler for president. there is always the danger that when you have a free society with democratic processes, that the majority will vote to persecute the minority.
Yep.
And that is intrinsic to any democratic process. Now, we do have safeguards. We have the Bill of Rights. We have limits on what the majority can do. Now in our jury trials, the Supreme Court has said that you can't base your decisions to kick someone off a jury because of their race. We don't have these all white juries anymore. The Supreme Court has said that that sort of use of jury selection to determine the racial composition of a jury is unconstitutional. Same is true for sex, that you can't kick people off a jury just because they're a woman or just because they're a man. The jury has to be a cross-section of the community. So I think that sort of racist or sexist outcome is very unlikely. Not to say impossible at all. There's still injustices in the world. We're never in this world going to eradicate all injustice.
Sure.
We can only devise a system that is the least likely to produce injustice. And I'm much more comfortable in trusting liberty to my fellow citizens than I am to some government official somewhere.
Wow.
The jury, despite its flaws, and I will, no man-made institution is going to be perfect. But at the end of the day, there is no greater protector of our liberty than the jury system. I would give up every institution of government before I would give up the jury system, because the government cannot put me in prison unless they first convince 12 of my peers that I violated a constitutional law, a law that is constitutionally valid. That's the protection we have. I don't trust the federal government or the state government to protect my rights. But I at the end of the day, maybe I don't trust my fellow citizens totally, but I trust them more than anybody else.
Okay, wow. That's a good way of putting it. So you're running for re-election?
Well, I'm not planning to run for re-election as county attorney. My term will expire at the end of 2026.
Okay.
However, I have formed an exploratory committee exploring the possibility that I will be running for the United States Senate next year out of the state of Iowa. It's the seat that Senator Joni Ernst will be vacating. She has announced she's not running for re-election, creating an open seat in the United States Senate. I am planning to have a formal decision made by the middle of October about whether or not I'm running, but it sure looks like I am.
Okay, sounds good. So since you won the race as a Libertarian, and as you mentioned, it's very rare to do that, what tips can you give to Libertarian candidates or other alternative party candidates that are running for county or local office?
Yeah, so it can be done. I mean, when I run for the United States Senate, if I run, I'm going to run as a Libertarian. I believe that there is the opportunity for candidates to win office as third-party candidates. I would say a couple things. One, by way of advice, start at a local level, a local election, school board, city council, mayor, or a county office like county attorney or county treasurer. I think at the local level, and you have a greater opportunity to run a campaign without needing a lot of money, a lot of campaign funding. I do strongly believe that local elections, people are willing to consider third-party candidates, especially if it's a nonpartisan race. A lot of city councils, school boards, are nonpartisan positions, and people will vote for the best candidate regardless of their party affiliation, especially if you know your neighbors or your fellow church members, or if you belong to civic organizations, Rotary Club or Kiwanis or Lions. You can mount a campaign, and then if you win at the local level, that will hopefully give you some credibility and experience that will allow you to run a campaign for a higher office. I think we also need to look at the possibilities, opportunities for coalition building. In Iowa, we now have the reputation of being this kind of ruby red Republican state. And I think that's just not true. We are famed for our Iowa caucuses. Well, only 11% of Iowans participated in the caucuses.
Wow.
Of that 11%, about 7% of Iowans participated in the Republican caucus. And then of that 7%, of Iowans who participated in the Republican caucus, roughly 80% of the people who went to the Republican caucus voted for Donald Trump. Well, the message the news media put out was Donald Trump overwhelmingly wins the Republican caucuses in Iowa, but really, only maybe 5 or 6% of Iowans showed up to vote for him. And I think that kind of Republican control in Iowa right now is actually much more fragile or much shallower than it appears. So many people I talked to who voted for Donald Trump voted for him not because they liked him, but because they disliked Kamala Harris. They're not voting for Donald Trump, they're voting against Kamala Harris. And then the reverse is true. So many Democrats I talked to, or independents, who voted for Kamala Harris, it's not because they liked Kamala Harris. I'm not sure I met anyone who was actually excited about Kamala Harris, but they were so opposed to Donald Trump that they would vote for anybody over Donald Trump. And what that means is most voters are not voting for a candidate, they're voting against a candidate. They want to vote for the lesser of two evils to prevent the greater evil from materializing. But so long as we keep doing that, we're perpetuating an evil system.
Yes.
And I think if voters can be provided with a credible third-party candidate who gives them somebody to vote for, this is where the coalition building comes in. I think it is possible to build a coalition of disaffected Democrats, disaffected Republicans, libertarians, independents. We are the majority. Those who are Republican not because they drank the Kool-Aid and carry their Republican Party membership card around, but because they think the Republican Party is the lesser evil. And those who are Democrats not because they've drunk the Democratic Kool-Aid and carry their Democratic Party membership card around, but just can't vote Republican. I think that's probably a plurality of the electorate. You throw in independents, libertarians. We are the majority. The core of the Republican Party and the core of the Democratic Party are now in the minority. They are in the fringe. The disaffected and the independent. We are the majority. We just need to rally around credible candidates.
Well put. Well put. So we thank you for coming on the podcast today and talking about your history, your current activities, and what it's like to be an elected official under the banner of the Libertarian Party.
Yeah, no, thank you. And if I can put a plug in, we have formed this exploratory committee. I have a website. Laehn, my last name is spelled L-A-E-H-N. Again, that's L-A-E-H-N. My website's Laehn for Iowa, the number 4, so L-A-E-H-N, the number 4, Iowa, IOWA.org. If your listeners want to learn more about me, I have some more information about myself on my website. But I really enjoyed our conversation today, and I thank you for having me.
We're glad to have you. We wish you all the best in your political activities as well as everything else you do in life.
Very good. Thank you.
Bye.